You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, Canes family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website for free. Use the promo code Miami30, and also subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Miami is now 2-0 and ranked in the top 10, so we can dream a little bit. So today I'm going to dream with my guy, Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He's kind enough to join me this morning on a Monday. Thanks for joining me, Alex.
It's my pleasure, Marcus. And I like dreaming, and hopefully this year is different because, it's been 4 years since Miami cracked the top 10. They've just done that again. But the last time, as far as I can tell, did a little research this morning, the last time Miami finished a season inside the top 10 was way back in 2003. So, and I'm going to talk about this a lot in my next episode of Locked On Canes. Cracking the top 10 is great. Maintaining it, that's going to be the real challenge.
Absolutely. Miami defeated Florida A&M with ease, 56-9 over the weekend, and now find themselves, like you said, in the top 10. So I think this is kind of the best time for us to dream big and really see, or foresee what exactly the Miami Hurricanes can do for the rest of this 2024 season. Cam Ward, let's talk about him, Donno. I mean, he's just been spectacular in these first two games. I think exceeding expectations, and is now a legit candidate for the Heisman Trophy. When we last looked at the FanDuel Heisman betting odds, we got Ward that is second in the betting odds at plus 750, right behind Quinn Ewers at plus 500. Carson Beck not too far behind, plus 850, and Jackson Dart following him at plus 950. So I think the last time Miami had a Heisman candidate sent to New York was maybe 2002. Correct me if I'm wrong there. And it was two of them. It was Willis McGahee and Ken Dorsey, if I'm not mistaken. Donno, would you bet on Cam Ward winning the Heisman?
I would. And here's the thing. First of all, as you have outlined, it's been a long time since Miami has had a quarterback that we believe to be this special. It doesn't mean we haven't had some good ones. De'Aaron King had a good first season with Miami before, he got injured. Second season, that made way for Tyler Van Dyke, who had a big flash of 6 games that first season and then could never maintain it. We all liked Brad Kaya down here, but never got into that Heisman conversation. Malik Rozier had that really good first 10 games at Miami, but you got to go back a long time. You mentioned 2002 when Miami sent both Ken Dorsey and Willis McGahee to the Heisman ceremony. I think they took votes away from each other, unfortunately, because
Right.
they finished fourth and fifth in the voting that year. The thing about Cam Ward is he checks off so many boxes when you talk about what a Heisman candidate should look like, because first of all, he's a very exciting player, right? He's a quarterback that offers you dual threat capabilities. He's not like a pure runner so much, but he scrambles so well to extend time. And he did show you that running ability with that 8-yard touchdown that he scored against FAMU, where he went Superman over the pylon. He had a couple of runs against Florida. The degree of difficulty with some of the throws that he completes, it's like he's going to provide you the Heisman Trophy sort of highlights. The other thing that could work in Miami's favor, and I will proceed with caution on this one, but Miami has, compared to some of the other quarterbacks who are in the Heisman conversation right now, Miami has a more manageable schedule. So you could foresee maybe an easier path to Miami being a double-digit type win team. And that, takes nothing away from, Quinn Ewers from Texas. Texas looks incredible. Carson Beck at Georgia. Georgia looks incredible, but they do have to, play that SEC schedule. So maybe there's going to be some cannibalization there and some opportunities for not so good games where, Cam Ward and being in Miami. And again, I know that the haters will say, well, Miami, it's not a college town. Nobody cares about college football in Miami. Miami's a national media market, Marcus, as we know. And something,
Yeah.
Ward said something after the Florida game that really got me thinking. Like, he mentioned, like, yeah, you know what? I was doing the same stuff at Washington State, and it's like nobody really noticed it. But now that I'm in a bigger market and I'm flashing the way that I am, suddenly I'm getting this national attention. Like, you're going to get national attention when you do stuff like that at Miami. So I'm not guaranteeing Ward wins the Heisman. I feel pretty good about him, hopefully getting to New York at the end of the year. But with plus 750 odds, I think he could do a lot worse than putting a few bucks on Cam Ward at plus 750 to win the Heisman. I think he's going to be in that hunt.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think the schedule is going to play a big factor here. Miami plays some teams where he can really pad the stats, and if you look at the Heisman Award, it's really a statistical award for the most part. I think for the past few years, I think statistically, whoever is just like, whoa, just kind of blowing your mind when it comes to stats, that is the player that ends up winning the Heisman. I think part of who wins the Heisman as well is just the team success. You can't have like a 6,000-yard passer and play for Hawaii or something like that and have like a 4-8 record, something like that. That's just not going to work. So the success of the team also kind of plays a part in it as well. So I do believe Miami's going to have a really successful season this year. I see 2 losses tops in this regular season for Miami, and I think that would be good enough to get Cam Ward to New York. And I think his dynamic ability of running the football and passing the football is something that Heisman voters like to see as well. And we saw that with his super Cam move this weekend. I think, that's definitely going to be on the highlight reel if he definitely goes to New York. And it actually made SportsCenter top 10 as well.
That's right.
So, the national audience is really getting to know who Cam Ward is. And I expect that to continue, especially this week against Ball State, where I actually think Florida A&M is more, I actually think Florida A&M is more talented than Ball State. So I expect more Heisman-like moments from Cam Ward. And if you're thinking about putting money on Ward, I think now's the time to do it, because I think the odds are just going to get significantly worse as this season goes on. But let's keep on dreaming, Dono. Let's talk the national championship here, because Miami, I think, with this quarterback, can win every game. I think that Ward gives them a chance to win every game, beat every team in the country. There's no team that scares you. There's no team that you can say, well, Miami has no chance. No, Miami does have a chance in every game that they play, and that would include the Texases, the Georgias, the Ohio States. I think Miami can compete with those teams at this point, just because of the depth and who they have at quarterback. Right now, the odds for the national championship for Miami, I just have those up here, are plus 2,000. So they're behind teams like Penn State, who I actually think is not as good as Miami. I saw them struggle against Bowling Green. Ole Miss, not really proven yet. I thought Oregon kind of struggled in a couple of games already this season. Alabama struggled with USF for most of the game on Saturday. And then you got the top 3, who I think is a legit top 3 in Texas, Ohio State, and Georgia. Donna, right now, are you betting on the Hurricanes to win the national championship?
Oh, I mean, maybe at plus 2,000, I take a shot. I think Miami is closer to that conversation than they've been in probably a little over 20 years. So I will give Miami that. I will say that the teams that are at the very, very tip top, like nobody that's left on Miami's regular season schedule me on paper. Not guaranteeing they win every game, but I'm not going into, oh my God, we can't beat them. Like nothing like that. However, if you were to get to that semifinal or college football playoff final, I would not probably not bet Miami straight up against Georgia. And I say that because I watched and, I kind of came out of that first week maybe more down on Clemson than I was high on Georgia. But, Georgia completely negated Clemson's offense. And then Clemson, like, had a point to prove. They go out there and they score 66 points against Appalachian State. I know Appalachian State is not Georgia, but, they made sure to show, hey, our offense was not really the problem. Georgia was the problem. So it's like, I don't know. At the same time, it's like, I'm in a little bit of disbelief, like how in year 3, how much it looks like Mario Cristobal really revolutionized this roster. And I guess with the transfer portal, you can accelerate that a little bit because, Norm, and obviously Miami still recruits high school exceptionally well, right? That's always been Mario's bread and butter. But I think when you're able to not only recruit very well, but then supplement with players like Cam Ward and Tyler Barron, who's played like an absolute monster, and Simeon Barrow and Damian Martinez and all the rest, that you can actually accelerate. Where I kind of feel like Miami so far, I know we're only 2 games in, but almost feels like they're a little bit ahead of schedule with the roster build. So maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, but at the same time, it's like 2 years ago, this was a 5-7 team with no depth whatsoever. Are they really ready to beat Georgia or to beat Texas or to beat Ohio State? I don't know. But can they get into that 12-team playoff and maybe get towards the national semifinal? I think they can. So it's like, I don't know if I'm quite ready yet to say national championship. However, at plus 2,000 odds, it may be worth taking a shot because the return would be very big.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be very interesting to see if this team actually makes a run here in year 3 of Mario Cristobal. I watch the comments. I know you do on your podcast as well, Locked on Canes. You've seen the comments for the past couple of years, and some fans were actually calling for Mario Cristobal's, firing. I know you've seen that on your comments, right?
I sure have. Yeah,
Right.
I sure have. And listen, and if Miami loses even 1 game this year, you're going to have some of those comments afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's surreal to kind of even think about or dream about Miami making the college football playoff. I think the timing of the 12-team playoff and just how good this team is couldn't be any better for the Hurricanes. Just to hear the crowd cheering Mario's name after that Florida game, I was just like, wow, what a difference a year makes. So yeah, I think Miami is a legitimate national championship contender just because when you see the college football field, Dono, no team really scares you that much. I mean, Texas looks pretty good from what I saw. I did watch the game against Michigan, but I think Michigan is actually
fraudulent this year. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And then we saw that Notre Dame is certainly a fraudulent team, losing to Northern Illinois. And, I already talked about Penn State struggling with Bowling Green. Ohio State really hasn't played anybody yet to really kind of prove their worth. And Georgia looks pretty good too. So I would say Georgia, Texas, and Ohio State are just kind of the top teams to me. And then you can throw Miami as the 4th team or any other team, that you're a fan of that's in the top 10 right now.
And you know what? I'll add something else in Miami's favor. I think that there's something special about this particular Miami team that hopefully they can replicate this in the next couple of years, where the mix of leadership you get from players who are in their last year in college. And again, hopefully they're grooming younger leaders who can kind of take over for next year, because, Cam Ward, he's one of one, right? I mean, I'm looking at him on the screen right now. Not only is he a special football player, but he's a special leader. And at everybody, offense to defense, walk-ons to scholarships, they all respect Cam Ward. Xavier Restrepo, Jalen Rivers, these are guys who are in their final years at the University of Miami. So there's something about this team. They're so strongly player-led. And, of course, Cam Ward is so special on the field. You only have him for 1 year. So you do kind of get the feeling that, man, this would be, you know, if Miami's gonna win a national title anytime soon, like this would be the year to do it, because I don't know if you're going to be able to find another Cam Ward next year, whether it's on the roster right now or somebody you grab from the transfer portal. So this does feel like, you know, I think Miami can be very good for the next several years and continue to build. But I think there's something so special about QB1 that if there is a year within the next couple where you can truly contend for a national title, maybe this is the right year to do that.
Yeah, it definitely depends on Cam Ward's health. Let's just be honest, because we saw Reese Poffenbarger in this last game, and he wasn't really the most impressive guy. So I certainly don't believe, or I'm not sold on Reese Poffenbarger leading this team to a national title if Cam Ward goes down. So it definitely depends on the health of Ward. Now, when you look at this schedule, though, man, there are some potential pitfalls. Let's just be real about it. I mean, this schedule is very manageable. I think we kind of thought that going into the season, but now after 2 games, we kind of see teams that are kind of emerging here. Louisville is ranked 19th, I believe, in the country at this point, and you also have Syracuse, who looked pretty good against Georgia Tech, that same Georgia Tech that beat Florida State in the first game of the season. So that game against Syracuse at the end of the year in the Carrier Dome, I think that's what they still call it now.
I think it's called something else now, so I just call it the Dome.
Okay, let's just call it the Dome. That will be a tough game, tough environment, especially if they are in contention for the ACC championship or even a bowl game. That crowd is going to be ready to spoil Miami season. But when you look at the schedule as a whole, Donno, what potential trap games do you see for this rest of this 2024 season?
Yeah, there's a handful, and I think it's so important that we learn this lesson every single year, but this year more than most, where you don't, you know, preseason predictions, sometimes a team you think is really good, like Florida State, may not be as good as you thought they were once the season actually begins. You know, Miami gets Florida State at home. I still say that's going to be a tough game, even though Miami's roster looks so much better. Rivalry game. You know, we've seen certain years where one team looks way better than the other, and it still comes down to a field goal. How many times has that happened over the years? So, you know, I feel a little better about the Florida State game. I do not take them lightly, but no one would consider that really a trap game because of the rivalry. Anyone who wasn't paying attention to Cal, they're paying attention to Cal now. Cal, not only did they shock Auburn on the road, like they flat out outplayed Auburn at Jordan-Hare Stadium. I think Auburn has a real quarterback problem because Peyton Thorne was, I don't know what kind of decisions he thought he was making out there, but at the same time, Cal's quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, South Floridians know him well. He played exceedingly well in that game. Cal's defense looks like a real problem with the way they were disguising coverages and the way that they were stopping the run. And something I think what impressed me most about Cal was even in a game when their star player, Jaden Ott, was basically negated. I don't think he was 100% healthy. And I also think Auburn was really keying on him. They had other running backs stand out and play big games when their star player wasn't having a good game. So that showed me more depth than I thought Cal had. And Miami has to go out there to California. You know, I still think Miami has a better team than Cal, but you don't automatically fly out there and get a win. You mentioned a couple of the other ones. I mean, Syracuse is looking like it's going to be a tough game. You know, I still want to see, you know, Kyle McCord continue that level of play throughout the season, but he threw for like over 350 against Georgia Tech, which was an impressive game. You know, we all wrote McCord off because when he was at Ohio State, it looked like he was the one holding that team back. Now he's looking pretty good at Syracuse. He's got over 300 yards in both of the games he's played so far, you know, and so Syracuse just beat Georgia Tech, and of course, Miami has Georgia Tech on the schedule in Atlanta this time. Miami should be out for revenge after what happened last year. But yeah, and Louisville, I wouldn't even call that a trap game, because that's just a good team who Miami has to go play on the road. That can be a tough environment to play in when that stadium there is packed, and it will be packed against Miami. So, these are not this is not the type of murderer's row you would see on an SEC schedule or a Big Ten schedule, but these are some games, especially a few of these, you didn't necessarily think preseason they would be this tough. But these are some tough games where Miami is going to have to have the type of razor focus that they've not had in recent years. I can't remember the last time Miami has actually gotten through a full season where every single game they showed up mentally strong with their A game. They have to do that this year, because there are some teams on this schedule that are going to beat you if you don't show up 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. With Miami's success, they're not going to sneak up on anybody. I think everybody kind of knows how good Miami is. Obviously, they're not ranked in the top 10, so they have that ranking next to their name. So I think teams know what kind of team that they're playing, and they're going to want to knock them off. I think a lot of teams, it's going to be their Super Bowl. I think obviously for Ball State coming up next week, it's their Super Bowl. USF is a team that we didn't mention. I think that's
right.
A sneaky trap game as well. I think that crowd is going to be hyped up and juiced up to help their team get a win. This is a team that pretty much battled with Alabama for the entire game. That score is not indicative of what actually took place in that game. I think Bama just kind of broke off some long runs towards the end of the game with 5 minutes left. This was a relatively close game. So it really kind of proved that USF is going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think it was good that they kind of challenged Alabama, so that really puts that team on Miami's radar for when they travel to Tampa in a couple weeks. I agree with you about Louisville. I think Louisville is a team that is not necessarily a trap game, because it's obviously an ACC game. They seem like they'll probably be ranked during that time, so it doesn't constitute the definition of a trap game, because I think Miami is going to be absolutely ready for that team. I think that's probably the toughest game on the schedule, because that's usually a very tough pace to play, and a lot of kids from South Florida on that team.
Yeah,
a lot of kids, including Don Chaney, who's the running back for Miami for the past couple of years.
And Jaleel Skinner is on that team now too.
Yeah, absolutely. Stanquan Clark. There's just a bunch of South Florida guys on that team that are looking to prove that Miami should have recruited them or went after them in the transfer portal. So that is definitely a game to consider as well. I'm glad you mentioned Georgia Tech as well, because that game, to me, I think will be a tough game as well, because that offense is explosive. That offense, I think, can move the ball pretty much against anybody if you're caught slipping or sleeping. So I think that is a game that Miami should be concerned with as well. And like I said, all these other teams will be playing Miami like it's a Super Bowl, like Wake Forest, the Duke game, as well. The fighting Manny Diaz's will be trying to knock off the Hurricanes as well, especially for their coach. So there's a lot of potential pitfalls here during the season. But in your mind, actually, before the season started, I think everyone kind of had a number as to what is the bar for this team as far as winning games. Vegas, their bar was 9 or 9.5. So I guess you could say 10 if you're counting the half there. But now after 2 games, has your perception kind of changed for this Hurricanes team? Because I think this team has kind of exceeded the expectations of what they would be going into the season. So first, Donno, tell me what you thought this team would do as far as their win total is concerned going into the season. And now after 2 games, Has your expectations risen at all?
Yeah, so preseason, my pick was 10-2 was what I said preseason, how I thought Miami would finish the regular season. And as far as like, because I also had sort of a sidebar as to where I would like draw the line with a successful season versus a disappointing season. And I drew that bar at 9, where if like as long as Miami won 9 games, I could say, okay, this was an acceptable season. Anything below that. And so yeah, I think now I have changed my prediction. I've raised my bar just a little bit from expecting 10 wins to now expecting 11. Just kind of giving Miami a little margin for error to say it's hard to go 12-0. You might slip up somewhere, and if you slip up, how do you respond from that? Right. And you know, I agree with you. The Louisville game is probably the toughest one on the schedule. And, you know, depending on how well Louisville plays the rest of the way, Miami might even be a slight underdog when they go into that game. It's going to be a tough one. But I think one of the big reasons why I've kind of moved my bar from 10 wins to 11 wins is I no longer pencil in Florida State as like a game you could or should lose, right? Where preseason, I believe the lies like a lot of people did, because if you followed what the reporters out of Florida State were saying, it's like, hey, this team might be better than last year. Their defensive line, the best in the country. Don't worry about DJ Uyunglele. He's doing great in practice. It's like now you have to wonder if you can even trust the reports that are coming out of Tallahassee. You know, thankfully they were just off this past weekend, so they couldn't lose. But they're off to an 0-2 start, and just the line of scrimmage play has been uninspiring. You know, their quarterbacking has been quite embarrassing by DJ Uyunglele to this point. So, you know, I now feel like, especially at home, that's a game Miami should win. So right there, that's an extra win that I pull off of my prediction. So I'm going 11-1 now.
Yeah, Florida State, I think will battle Miami. It's a
Yeah,
rivalry game.
I
I think it'll
agree.
be similar to like how it was last year for the Seminoles with the Canes. I mean, Miami had a legit chance to win, and going into the game, I think everybody kind of thought that. Not everyone. I would say most people thought that Florida State would kind of win that game going away, and it came down to one possession at the end of the game, like that game always does, right? For the most part. I mean, we had some blowouts here and there in the last 5 years from both teams. But I think this game is going to still come down to maybe, a possession or two, when it comes to the Seminoles. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the bar here is 11 games. I really do. I think anything less than that would be now a disappointment. I can't believe we're saying this right now about the Hurricanes, to be honest, because from what we've experienced and Hurricanes Nation has experienced for these past couple of years, it's a little bit surreal to be kind of having this conversation with you, Donno, that, okay, well, yeah, they should win 11 games. Yeah, it really kind of blows my mind here, but that's what a quarterback can do. That's what recruiting can do. And that's what the transfer portal can do for a college football team these days. So I agree with you. I think if they lose 2 games this season, you'll probably feel somewhat disappointed. If they miss the playoffs now, it's certainly disappointing at this point. If Miami somehow misses the playoffs, just with how the ACC kind of looks this season, I think Clemson is still going to be a contender here, just based on what we saw against Appalachian State last Saturday. I mean, you score 66 points on a team that really hates your guts. That's pretty impressive in itself. So I think Clemson it could be the team that Miami faces in the ACC championship game. But the way the playoffs are set up right now, it seems like even the loser of these championship games will likely get into the playoffs anyway. So now that you've kind of set the bar at 11 games, just quickly, Donno, your prediction: do they meet that expectation of 11 wins?
It's like, based on what I've seen so far, yes, but it's like it's always, I always leave room to reevaluate after every single game. I don't necessarily think the Ball State game is going to teach us too much about this team this week, but I'm not ready to crown Miami yet, even though I feel like 11 games should be attainable with this schedule. There's certain things I still need to see to believe, because last year they started 4-0 and they looked like world beaters. And then the Georgia Tech thing happened right after the 4-0 start last year. And so again, like I think this team is different, from the quarterback to the leadership, to the depth. Like I feel like this team will probably not fall into the traps that teams of recent years have. But at the same time, for whatever reason, every time Miami hits that ACC part of the schedule, that's usually when like you go from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde, and then sometimes the bad version of Miami football shows up. And so, honestly, I think the single biggest challenge for this team will be consistency. I think is playing up to the standard that they played at in Florida. And we even saw, this past weekend, against FAMU, it was, of course, the scoreboard shows you a dominant win, and it was, but it wasn't perfect. I thought we all went into halftime feeling very underwhelmed by specifically the second quarter. There were, too many penalties. There was some sloppiness. There were some big plays on offense that were left on the field. There were, a couple of defensive possessions where they bent but ultimately didn't break because they didn't give up any touchdowns, but they allowed a few too many big plays. And it's like, you can do that for, a quarter against FAMU and not really hurt you. But if you have lapses like that for a full quarter against Louisville or Florida State, then you could talk about game-changing things. So I think the challenge will be, I think we all know what this team is capable of when you see a guy like Tyler Barron, who's already racked up 4 sacks in 2 games this year, and you see what Cam Ward is accomplishing out there, and Xavier Restrepo with 200-yard receiving games already. Like, we know what this team is capable of. They just have to show us that they can go out there for 12 games and consistently avoid mental and physical lapses. So I think that is the biggest challenge moving forward, is putting, what you did at Florida, put that in a bottle and make sure you're guzzling that before every single game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most fans are still kind of guzzling that win, and are probably still surviving off of that. Alex Donno, ladies and gentlemen, from Locked On Canes, joining me, and also part of the CanesCounty.com family now as well. Make sure you definitely check out his piece, After the Storm, on CanesCounty.com right now, and also Mailbag as well. He'll be also putting together a mailbag story. So definitely submit your questions to Alex Donno, and he will answer them for you on CanesCounty.com. Thanks for joining me today this morning.
Marcus, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And that's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the website, CanesCounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Also, subscribe to this podcast on all platforms, and also subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Until the next episode.